Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Terrace Podcast. I am your host, a managerless Craig Fowler, and I am joined on this occasion by Euan Taylor. Euan, how's it going?
Not too bad, Craig. Not too bad. Unfortunately, I'm not managerless, but soon enough, I suspect. Probably by this time next month, I suspect we'll be in the same boat. But yes.
And hopefully by that time, my team will not be managerless, although the manager may have been found by a computer programming software called Star Lizard. So
Yes. I'd fully recommend anyone wanting to really understand how the Star Lizard system works, and maybe just computers in general, should read Keith Jackson's column in the Daily Record today. Keith Jackson has a knack of making any technology beyond the light bulb sound like it's been invented, like only understandable by like three guys that work for NASA. It's incredible. Anytime any sort of modern development happens in football, Keith Jackson just sounds so confused by it. And so he obviously thinks that Derek McInnes should get the Hearts job because he knows who Derek McInnes is and probably has his phone number. But well worth a read.
I quite like the idea of Derek McInnes having the Hearts job, to be fair, and I do worry a bit. I like the idea of Star Lizard finding players. I think it certainly worked for Brighton. It's just I don't know. It's just the kind of culture. Like if a manager is found by this technology in Scottish football, does the man just have no chance before he's even taken a game?
Obviously the Cathro precedent, but I don't think there was no data on Cathro. That was the problem. It was just like, this guy seems to know what he's talking about, or not what he's talking about, what he's who he'd worked with and so on. The problem, I think it should work, and I actually think probably this has all happened at a good time for Hearts, probably, in that I think. Had Naismith, started the season as last season finished, he probably has done that. That's the problem. But had the form been similar as the season as last season overall, and Hearts have been sort of in around third, fourth, fifth, maybe even, I think there would have been the club would have probably persisted with Naismith beyond out of politeness, even with potentially with the new models that are coming in terms of recruitment. I think it's a good chance for Hearts because we can maybe come on to what you think Hearts sort of what would constitute a good league season for Hearts at this point. But I think probably third place is gone. So in that context, I think it's probably quite good to make a change now and get a guy in that will buy in fully to presumably into the Star Lizard model. Now the only thing is, I think it was Chris Finn, friend of the podcast, did say on Twitter, and I sort of agree, is that there is the chance that, like, if you appoint an algorithm manager, let's call him, at this stage when you're already bottom of the league, there is a potential, a relatively high potential, for it to be a complete disaster and to put anyone in Scottish football off appointing anyone foreign or remotely sort of data-driven in terms of the recruitment, for decades. That could happen again, as has happened every other time anyone's tried to do anything novel in football in Scotland. But I think it probably will work out quite well for Hearts in the long term. In the short term, it's very funny that the Hearts have fallen so spectacularly on their face at the start of the season.
Well, if it does go horribly, horribly wrong, then what I would say to that is that the last time we were in the Championship, I couldn't go to any of the games. So, why not just roll it back so I could go to some of these decent away grounds, although Arbroath are now in League One. I'm trying to think who else might have been in the Championship at the time. It's not quite as good as the way
it's not a seaside league anymore. So it's...
it's a bit more Central Belty, which is a bit more boring. But there's still some, I think... I mean, Inverness aren't even in it anymore. Actually, no, I'll take it back. I don't want to go to the Championship. It's rubbish.
Yes, I would say.
The way days are all crap.
Yeah, you're part of Thistle, probably, unless they get promoted, which seems like
it. I like going to Wraith as well. Both Dunfermline's not too bad. It's quite local. Anyway.
That can happen.
We'll actually begin with talking about Hearts and Stephen Naismith's last game in charge of the club. That was the 2-1 defeat to St Mirren, which took place on Saturday. We will talk through the 2 Premiership matches, and then we'll get to the 4 games in the quarter-final of the Premier Sports Cup. But as I just said, we'll go to Paisley to begin with. And Hearts losing again in the Scottish Premiership turned out to be Stephen Naismith's last game in charge. The scoring got started. All the goals came in the first half. The scoring got started with an OG by Gerald Taylor. Very different from the OG scored earlier in the season against Dundee, and also quite different to the OG that Daniel Ojikoke scored against Victoria Pilsen away from home, and that this one was just kind of hit off the back of his head by his namesake, Richard Taylor, from St Mirren, and it ended up in the back of the Hearts goal. Hearts will level 10 minutes later, though, through Craig Halkett. Very nice header after another set piece, and then the third set piece goal of the game, and what highlights one of the major flaws with Hearts so far this season, and a stark difference from the record the team enjoyed last campaign, losing another goal from yet another set piece. This time, very, very, very nicely dispatched by Toyose Olisanya. A nice, kind of one of those aesthetically pleasing goals, even though it's not particularly like it's not like a great strike from distance, but it just catches it really cleanly, catches it first time, just as the kind of ball's headed down, and just thumps it into the back of the net.
It's the kind of goal that the woke mob are trying to outlaw. A lump up the park, big lad heads it on, wee fast lad wallops into the roof of the net. You're not allowed to score goals like that anymore. That was really I really enjoyed that goal, but it was a terrible goal from Hearts' perspective. Who have now scored as many own goals this season, I believe, as actual goals. I believe that's correct.
Well, there was certainly there was a period where we were trailing that, so that doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, we were ahead before that.
Yes.
Oh no, we weren't. Sorry, the Taylor one was first, and then Halkett equalised it up. So we were 2 each going into the game, and now we're 3 each.
Yes, excellent.
Fucking hell.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's just. I mean, I went back and listened to the Patreon episode you did with Laurie Dunsire a couple of weeks ago about Hearts. I thought I'd better remind myself of what you'd been saying about Hearts and seeing if anything, 2 weeks ago, and see if anything actually transpired that you said. And basically, I mean, I think it was probably clear a couple of weeks ago that it probably wasn't going to get better, and the last couple of weeks haven't. Nothing has happened since, which has arrested the slide whatsoever. And there's loads of things wrong, obviously, and it does seem maybe that having too many players of equivalent ability has really been a problem in terms of just trying to chop and change. It's always tempting, I think, to chop and change when you have that scenario, and that's what Naismith's done. He's maybe ended up, I don't know if he's ended up going with the players he sort of trusts the most, which I think is what managers tend to do often when they've run out of ideas and they're really under pressure. And I thought when the team line came out, I thought you're starting a back four where I'm not entirely sure that any of the players in that back four suit playing in a back four. Maybe Penrice, but then Penrice probably isn't. I know he's been one of Hearts' better signings, but I don't think he's good enough to play for Hearts. And Taylor looks to me more like a wing back. I know he's played centre half previously, but to me he looks like a wing back. I don't think Halkett has the legs to play in a back four anymore, and I've never thought Kingsley could do it as a centre half. And that's ultimately that. It's pretty far away from the sort of solid back three that Hearts played with for most of the last season. And that's before getting on to obviously the problems further forward, of which there are legion. So it felt like Halkett and Kingsley. Maybe that's a good centre half pairing. Maybe 3 seasons ago, but I don't even think it would be with Kingsley as a part of the back four. It felt, and even I think you can go back to the Gordon decision over Clark, which I also don't agree with. I know you maybe have a different opinion on that, but I think that's quite a odd thing to have done, and I wonder if it was more of a. I always think that with older goalkeepers, it can be a bit of a power thing, and it's to become, especially big characters, very experienced guys. Craig Gordon, he's not bigger than Hearts, but not far off. And I think it's easy to put guys like that back in the team when they're in the squad and that they're sort of fit, inverted commas, and available. And I think, again, he's done that. Now, Gordon's not really at fault for the I wouldn't say he's at fault for either of the goals, albeit he will never come and claim a cross like that now. For the first goal, I suppose, but some goalkeepers maybe would have. But just generally, I think it's sort of I think, indicative of where it was going with Naismith, where he'd sort of ran out of ideas, wasn't really sticking to his guns, I don't think, which he didn't do last season either, in terms of the changing to be a bit more defensive. And ultimately, I think his reigns overall, despite the sort of third place finish last season, I think it's been a bit confused overall.
So there's a lot you said there. A lot of
yes.
A lot of disagree with to an extent. I think you're maybe a bit harsh on the kind of Halkett Kingsley thing. I think Halkett's actually been all right recently. I don't think he's been far from one of the kind of the bigger problems. He's got a wee bit to kind of get himself fully back up to speed again after spending so much time out. But I think he's actually been quite decent recently. Kingsley played in a back four quite a bit last season and looked pretty good there. And he's actually, I think people look at him and don't think he's a very good centre half because he has played at full back for a lot of his career. But you can look at some of for instance, he's actually like quite good in the air. Like for somebody you would think is like a career left back, he's like something like he's percentage of aerial duels won is like comfortably over 60%. I think it's even close to like 65, which is pretty decent. Like that's not. In fact, I think his number for that was not far short of Frankie Kent last season. You wouldn't think that with the two of them. I think just mainly because Kent's just a lot more aggressive and going for headers, and he'll go for ones that he might not necessarily win or win cleanly, but at least he's making it hard for the opposition striker to do anything with it. Taylor, we just don't really know. I'm not sure if he is a wing back, to be honest, because I'm not sure he's good enough in the football to be a wing back. I think he's been at his best this season in the Rangers and Celtic games when he's. Now that just may be a coincidence, but it could be about the fact that in these games, okay, job first, make sure you don't concede, and then second job is to go forward and create for the team. Whereas when you're playing in many of these other games, and then it could even add to that, like the away game in Europe, when again it was like don't concede, but the home game it was very much right. We've got to make up this goal. We're also without Shankland. You need to get forward and make stuff happen. And he was getting forward, and he really wasn't making stuff happen, and it just did not look comfortable on the ball at all. So I think he actually might be a better right back than he is a wing back. Penrice, I actually kind of agree with your general point in that he's been one of Hearts' better players this year. But every time I watch him, I still think, like, if you look at the business Hearts done in the summer, and this is a point you made that I certainly will agree with, in that Hearts have just got now far too many players of similar stature. And I guess that was the big problem with signing Spittle and Danda. And even, I know Dundee got top 6, but even like Boateng as well, is that you're bringing these guys in and you are giving more depth, but you're not making the starting 11 any better. And it's just confusing matters. And that's a good point you said as well. Kind of, it just feels a bit confused, and it just felt like Naismith was confused this entire season to know what to do with these new players, and changing the team too much, changing the shape too much, just no cohesion getting going whatsoever. And you talk about Penrice has been a decent signing, but he was the only player, really, you would say. I mean, you could probably say Taylor as well, but then again, you could have still said, actually, do you know what, we can stick with Atkinson and like, probably would, we would have needed a new right back because we've got like Len McKee's on loan. So say Taylor needed to be signed, you maybe didn't need to completely shove Atkinson to the side and then bring in Oyegoke as the other right back. So you've got 2 new right backs. But on the other side, Penrice was the only one that really needed to be signed because Cochrane was going to go. And I think the club knew that for a lot of the summer, that Cochrane was going to get interest. He was in the last year of his deal. He wasn't going to sign a new one because he wanted to return back down south instead of staying in Scotland. And Penrice has been a decent stopgap, but it's also Salazar was supposed to be the man coming in to do that, and he's not been any good.
No.
So, yeah, you're right what you say. Like, you look at even Boateng and Beringame, like, 2 of them feel a bit too similar for me to be doing that defensive midfield job. And guys like Spittle and Danda, there's just, in Forrest, and I mean, there's probably somebody else I'm missing, George Grant. Like, these guys are in and out of the team. They're moved forward, they're moved back. They're on the left of a 3, they're on the right of a 3, they're on the left of midfield.
Barry Mackay would be in that sort of category as well.
Barry Mackay as well. Yep, all these guys are just too much of a muchness in terms of ability. And Naismith just never really had a clear idea what the best way, and because often you could be with a manager in his situation and be like, right, to get yourselves out of this, it's almost like an analogy is like when a plane stalls and a plane, like an airplane, is falling from the sky. In order to get yourself out of the stall, you actually have to pitch the nose down. And then you could have to get like air over the wings, and then you accelerate through it. So you go down before you go up. I think in certain situations like this, where managers are really struggling and really toiling, that's probably the best piece of advice to give them. Is that just stick with something you think is going to work, and you may go down to start with, but eventually you'll find a way. There'll be a cohesion, there'll be an understanding, and you'll come up. It's obviously a lot easier said than done, because when you're not getting results and you're not playing well and the players you're choosing are not playing well, it's very easy to then go, okay, well, I need to change it again for next week. I think often it's best to just stick with one game plan and go, right, let's do this for 3 or 4 games and let's see where we are at the end of it, but I'm not going to change too much between one game and the next. I think that was even like impossible for Naismith to do, because I just never really had an idea all season that he really knew what his best team was and what the best system was and the best manner in which to play.
Yeah, I think, and how much of the problem do you think is the 31 goal a season man, Lawrence Shankland? Because I think I do have an axe to grind here, but I don't. He's not an easy player to get in a team. As wild as it sounds for a guy that scores that many goals, but how do you build a team around a guy that can't move to the extent that he can't move and has his skill set? Is that, and that's, I think that's been a big problem for Hearts, because I like when Hearts had Josh Ginnelly, and he was in that brilliant run of form just before he obviously then like conned someone into signing him and then instantly got injured. But it was Preston, was it? He went back to?
No, he went to Swansea.
Swansea, that's right. And you know, that worked because you had Ginnelly was a powerful guy, also very, very quick. And also could score wonder goals himself at times, and that sort of allowed Shankland to sort of cheat a bit, because he could sort of play up front by himself without doing that. He obviously needs legs around him, and I think last season he had the season of his life. I don't think he's going to replicate that, and that's okay. He doesn't need to replicate that. He at least needs to replicate maybe the season before, where he had, as I say, someone sort of doing his running for him. And and then Hearts sort of build from there. And he almost plays like a number 10, like sort of shadow striker.
We've tried that at points this season, but Vargas has just not been good enough to play that role ahead of him.
Because he's just not. Because Vargas, I can see Vargas, being an okay player for Hearts at some point, but I don't think it's clear if he's a striker or if he's a winger. And he definitely can't lead the line in a way that Ginnelly could. Or even, and not Tagawa was rubbish, but it looked like Tagawa looked like a good signing in that way, because he looked like he would, he looked like he had the attributes to maybe replace Ginnelly, but it turned out he just wasn't good enough. But as you said in that podcast you did with Laurie, like not signing anybody else to play that way, is I think it's fallen into the trap of thinking that Lawrence Shankland has turned into a much better player than actually he has. And thinking he'll be our number 9. I just don't know if that's what Shankland can do. And I mean, he will still score goals this season. I mean, he will do. It's just, I think he does cut off some tactical options, which maybe would have helped Hearts. And given Spittle's not the quickest, Danda physically is hopeless. That's the reason he's at the level he's at, and not a higher level. There wasn't quite certainly at least in the forward areas, there wasn't any physicality or athleticism signed, and I think that exacerbates the problem that Shankland already poses.
I don't have too much to disagree with there. Certainly, Shankland is. I do agree with the general point that he's not quite as easy a player to fit into a team as you think because of his lack of pace, and that was certainly an issue with Nielsen's season, and that was what you were saying about the kind of Ginnelly. I think last season they just managed to figure out. I don't even know how they managed to do it, and it was just him. Just everything he touched turned into goals, basically. I think as well. But like last season, they did partner him with Vargas at times to do that running, and Vargas was in better form last season than he is this one. But even last campaign when Shankland was up front by himself, he still managed to. Naismith figured something out there that managed to make him a more kind of consistent target in the penalty area than it was kind of under Nielsen, even with that kind of lack of pace. But whatever it was, he wasn't able to replicate it this campaign. We're already at 20 minutes. So we should talk about the team that actually won this match, which was St Mirren. So a few things to just highlight for St Mirren. I mean, we've talked about Olasanya before. He continues to just be great this season. But they do, like, his ascent has come at a time where Mandron, I think, has not gone back to the player he was at Motherwell, because he still looks better than he did then. But I'm not really been convinced by him this season. I think he has regressed a little bit. And Ayungo's not giving them... Ayungo's still not back to the player he was before his injury, and now it's got that length of time that you'd have to question whether he is going to get back to that. I thought Kevin Van Veen looked good off the bench when he came on.
Yeah.
Certainly a hell of a lot sharper than he did when he went to Killie last season. Mm-hmm. And if he can, like... You wondered about... I mean, I thought St Mirren were going to be fine, but last week I was kind of talking about the fact that they did look like they were maybe having a wee bit of a kind of identity crisis in terms of, like, they just look really unsure of themselves against Killie and were just knocking the ball around, like, sideways passing them. Like, this is not the team. And I was wondering whether they just had quite enough to get back into the top six of the season. But with Olasanya's ascension, and if Van Veen can be just half of the output he had that season at Motherwell, if he can provide that, so they've got just two forwards who will just be very good at this level, then I think you have to then start looking at them again and saying, nah, top six is a realistic possibility, especially since they're now, I think, getting a bit better play from behind them as well. O'Hara, Phillips and Caelan Boyd-Muntz was a midfield three. I think this was maybe one of the best times I've seen Boyd-Muntz play that so far this season. Mm-hmm. He's struggled a little bit, but for good reason, in that he was carrying an injury earlier in the campaign, which I think, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, I think it might have forced him out of a couple of games and certainly kind of limited him a little bit. That's what you want as a St Mirren midfield. You want him as the kind of quarterback, and then you've got O'Hara and Phillips. I mean, Phillips...
Big lads.
When he was it, and big lad and a strong runner. I mean, it's basically Mark O'Hara times two.
Yeah.
When he was at Aberdeen last season, I didn't really think much of him, but then as soon as he signed for St Mirren, I was like, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. He's a Stephen Robinson player. I think you probably need to give a lot of Aberdeen play. I mean, it was an absolute bin fire when Aberdeen, when Phillips came in there. And at the time, I mean, I think he was fairly well thought of at Crystal Palace at one point. So, and he played Championship football before a decent amount. So he should be, St Mirren should be like a really good springboard for him. And yeah, I think he could be a really good sign. I've been pretty impressed with St Mirren. I think that the Kilmarnock game, that was just a bad, it's like styles make fights, and when St Mirren are not a team you would pick to play against 10 men defended deep like a Derek McInnes team, it's just like, that's just not what St Mirren are all about. But if you're a team that sort of tries to go at them like Hearts, and St Mirren can just sort of battle them, then great. And yeah, Olasanya is almost exactly what Hearts could do with like that kind of that, and Van Veen might well be able to sort of play off him at some point. I mean, that could really be a very potent strike force if you even as I say, if you get Van Veen anywhere near. He's not going to be Motherwell, the absolute peak of Motherwell. I don't think that's going to happen again, but anywhere even close to that with Olasanya in this form, and it's really dangerous.
You can actually say in the first half in this game that Hearts maybe edged it. Like, St Mirren obviously had the 2-1 advantage, but Hearts started quite well. St Mirren then scored, Hearts equalised, and Hearts were again looking on top, and then St Mirren scored again. But in the second half, like, St Mirren just easily held Hearts at bay for the 45 minutes, and I think that was helped as well by Scott Tanser, who didn't start off the season well, but is now coming into a bit of form, and I think that's probably him won the battle again against Jayden Brown, who again, earlier in the campaign, showed a bit more about him than I'd saw from him last season. But they're a bit more, I think they could be a bit more exposed defensively when he's in the side. I think Tanser's just he's more experienced, especially at this level, and he's I think a better defender. I don't think it was any surprise that Richard Taylor behind him looked a lot more assured defensively in the second half as well, when he had a wee bit more protection in front of him.
Yes.
Right. Let's move to the other Scottish Premiership game that took place this weekend. And oh boy, what an interesting match this was. And I use the word interesting because despite the fact they finished 3 each, I still hasten to use the word good. That was Ross County 3, St Johnstone 3.
Oh, it's funny how, like, most of the time when two terrible teams play each other, I would say, and your teams like low in confidence, you get like a really sort of cagey, like horrible game. Both teams are terrified to make a mistake, and it can be 0-0 or usually maybe like 1-0 because one team has made that mistake. This was the complete opposite, where they just made mistakes with wild abandon throughout, and they just didn't care. But it also scored like really good goals. I mean, St Johnstone scored 3 absolute crackers for a start, and it was just, but the defending was appalling throughout the whole game.
I'm not having Dre Wrights being a cracker, by the way. That takes at least 1 deflection. I think 2.
Yes, but I mean, it looked good when it flew in. So it was, at the ground, you'd be thinking, Christ, we've scored 3 goal of the season contenders and we've still managed to not win a game. Has Nicky Clark ever scored a free kick before? I don't remember. I
don't remember him ever taking one.
No, it turned into Lee Griffiths against England briefly. Very, very odd. And I think it shows that at the moment you have to put these two teams as absolute cast iron favourites to be 12th and 11th.
Yeah.
And I'd sort of thought that St Johnstone would somehow finish 10th because that just seems to be what they managed to do, and Ross County would somehow finish 11th because that just seems to be what they do. But in the absence of anyone else being that, well, basically with Dundee United looking fair, we'll come on to, but obviously not a great result for them, but they look okay and solid enough that they won't be as bad as these two. I think you're looking at these two for 11th and 12th, and it's they're just. It's funny how like St Johnstone obviously lost. They didn't have Kipioka, they didn't have Sidibe, and you think, oh well, they're going to struggle to score goals. That wasn't the case, but they still look horrendous at the back. So yeah, it's a very, very entertaining game at least.
Well, I would say they struggle to score goals from open play.
Yes, so well, that remains the case, yes.
So they only had 3 shots on target the entire game, and those were the 3 goals. And those were, so it was a second phase from a free kick for the Dre Wright one, and then it's 2 direct free kicks from Nicky Clark that gets them their goals. And I think other than that, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, this is the most recent game I watched. Yeah. I don't remember really any other chances that they had. There might be something that I'm just blanking on. But it's still like... So I watched this one in its entirety. And the first half, County were the better team in the first half, but the first 20 minutes... Oh, actually, let me just check. When did Hale score?
Yeah, about 19 minutes.
19 minutes, So for the first 20 minutes, so Hale opened the score in 19 minutes and Dre Wright equalised just before half-time, then Nicky Clark scored in the 60th and then the 84th minute. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, St Johnstone did still not win the game, with Alex Samuel scoring in the 87th and Akil Wright in the 97th. But the first 20 minutes was a lot of, like, Casper Lopata was very much handling Mackenzie Kirk and Nicky Clark, and then he would step out with the ball and then he would pass it right to a St Johnstone player at the other end, either one of their centre-halves or right through to the goalkeeper. And then St Johnstone would try and pass the ball forward and either give it away or then result to go long, at which point Lopata would win it and then give it back to them. The only kind of difference in all of that was that Andre Raymond, who was maybe St Johnstone's best player, certainly up there, would occasionally go, right, saw this. I'm actually one of the rare decent signings that St Johnstone have made, and I'm going to take the ball, I'm going to run forward with it and get my team up the park. And that worked quite well until he was taken off very strangely for Dre Wright, who then didn't mark either man that he had to mark at the back post in the 87th minute.
God. Oh, the winner, or the equalisers. Good Lord. Yeah. Anyway.
And then County scored. And then they had a bit more control of the game. Johnson tried a brief kind of, his teams that normally do a brief kind of flurry of kind of territory. Try to put the opponent under pressure. Now they've got a goal to make up, but they never really look like doing anything with it. And then for about 10-15 minutes before the goal, you kind of thought, right, this is when County actually played it the best throughout the game and should have had another goal. They had the one cleared off the line, and Ronan Hale should have done a lot better with a chance that he had. They still wasn't certainly a lot more impressed with them against Dundee than I was in this game. Chilvers, who I was quite complimentary of last week. He was trying to do the same things, but they just weren't coming off. And I'm starting to think now whether... I mean, I feel bad for doing this, because last week I was like, oh, he's a new dad there. And then this week I'm like, he's pish. So I should maybe stop being so knee-jerk reaction. But this did me pause a little bit. In the early going, I was like, oh, that's him doing his thing. He's being aggressive. He's going at opposing players. I do wonder whether he's a bit better. He thinks he's better than he actually is. And he's going to spend his entire season running into opposing players rather than running past them.
Whereas Alex Samuel knows exactly how good he is, and he runs into players on purpose. It would seem to me that's sort of Alex Samuel's the way he works. And he came off the bench for Chovers and sort of turned the game around. Very odd player, Alex Samuel. Just absolutely terrible, but sort of weirdly effective at times.
I was a bit more impressed with Josh Naismith this week than I've seen him before. He looks like a good. It looks like a good link. And like when they first got him in, I was like, well, County really need a number 10. So is he going to be that player? I don't think he's going to be quite that, but he's quite a good. I think he looks like a good link between kind of midfield and between attack and defence. Like he's very, very dynamic and mobile kind of centre midfielder, which I suppose he'd have to be because he's quite wee. But he's good at like going back, getting the ball, can carry it forward, and he's good at kind of popping up when there's a second ball to take possession and then move it forward. And he does like to try and move it forward. I don't think he's particularly creative, but he looks to get it into like the feet of the forward player. So there's something there for County to work with. But yeah, then the second half starts. So County should be 2 goals ahead, and then St Johnstone equalise, and then like the County until they're 3-1 down, County were terrible in the second period, really not doing anything, really no kind of cohesion about them, nothing their trying's working. And that was when St Johnstone started to threaten a bit more. I felt like Jason Holt had a good game in the middle of the park. He's been impressive since he's signed for St Johnstone. And that was finally when Mackenzie Kirk started to get into the game and they started to cause a bit of problems in behind. And you saw that with the free kick that led to Clark's opener. But there was a couple of other occasions where he at least made life uncomfortable for them. And Clark was playing in that withdrawn role again, which doesn't really suit him at all. But he at least was kind of working hard, making himself a nuisance, helping winning the ball back. And St Johnstone, without really deserving it, got themselves 3-1 ahead. And then the defending. I mean, dear Lord. Kyle Cameron, I mean, when he was coming into this season and we were looking at the kind of defenders that St Johnstone had signed, the defenders at the club, and you're looking at Kyle Cameron and you're thinking, well, you're going to have to be good because the rest of them really look crap. But then you're looking at the level of football that he's kind of played at for the majority of his career. You're like, are you going to be any good though? You were in League Two last season, having played most of your time in the National League. I've got my doubts. Yes. Good enough to say. Not only does he do really bad things, like passing the ball out for the opening goal and giving it right to Ross County, but he also seems to be, he's a captain and he's a centre-half and he's got a bit of experience. All I see him in St Johnstone highlights or St Johnstone games I watch is pointing at players to do things and then them not doing it. And a lot of the times it's kind of like, should you not be doing that? Because the second goal, because I had to keep watching it over and over again, I'm like, how on earth you've just gone 3-1 up, how on earth does Dre Wright have 2 men to mark at the back post? And I keep looking at it and it looks like it should be Cameron's job, and Cameron kind of notices, there's something about it that Cameron notices, because he's pointing, he doesn't point. He does his usual point. And then Eamon Brophy makes a run, and I think he makes it off the blind side of, I think it might be Jason Holt. And Cameron spots that it's on Holt's blind side, so he goes with him. But really what he should be doing is just letting Eamon Brophy run, because I'm pretty sure he would have been offside anyway. Or at least shout at one of your teammates, go to him, go to the man running to the front post. But obviously if he's going to the front post, it's going to be a bit harder for him to score. Cameron should be peeling off to the back to give Dre Wright some help. I'm not going to completely absolve Dre Wright, because he could make it a whole lot more difficult with Samuel than he does, which is to basically just wave by Samuel as Samuel is nearly stopped by his own teammate, Michael Effetti, barging at the back of him.
Yeah. Wild.
And the equalising goal, I still don't know what happens. I've looked at every single replay. My best guess is I think it's supposed to be David Keltgens, who is marking Akil Wright, which to me feels like a mistake anyway, because Wright has proven himself so far this season to be absolutely fucking dynamite in the air in the opposing penalty area. So you really want your tallest man on him, or certainly your best player in the air. I would doubt that Keltgens is that without looking at the stats. I think he is supposed to be marking him, and I think he misreads the flight of the ball and gets caught in the melee. There's kind of like a group of players that all just collide together. There's like 5 of them in total. Yeah. And then Wright just drifts around the back. And, I mean, fair play to the guy, because yes, he is unmarked, but it is not an easy header.
No, he's,
brilliant. The way he plants that in the back post is just superb.
Yes. But, I mean, it's always been done to death a wee bit, but the St Johnstone captain decision is given that some of the other players in that squad is such a wild one, and is the leadership quality seem to be very much lacking.
He's come out, I didn't see this, but I've seen St Johnstone fans more about it. Apparently he's come out and defended the accusation that there's a lack of leadership by saying there's loads of leaders in this team. Are you one of them?
I don't think you are.
Also, it's very weird. I don't think it really cares. I don't want to make that. I don't think it's like that much. It's something that fans care about. I don't know how much of a difference it makes. So I don't want to go on about it. But I think it's really weird that you're captain somebody that's on loan.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the weirdest thing about it. And then also, it's not like you can maybe understand that if it was someone who's coming on loan and they've got they've had a career which puts them levels above the rest of the the rest of the squad. But I mean, say Jason Holt, for example, would he not be a better captain? Or Nicky Clark?
I would say so.
Like guys who've sort of been and done it in Scottish football. Very, very odd. But yeah, it might be something that an incoming manager could change.
Right, let's move on to the first of our 4 games in the Premier Sports Cup. And I was going to say, let's talk about the only one that's interesting. That's actually very unfair on Falkirk. That's probably that's certainly the second most interesting game to take place. But there's 2 that I don't think need to spend a whole lot of time on. But one that we will do was the game on Friday night. Motherwell 2, Dundee United 1. Let me just bring up the scorers to refresh my memory. I watched this, but it was Friday. That was a while ago now. Zach Robinson opened the scoring for the Steelmen right on the stroke of half-time after a fairly crap, let's put it that way, first half. I don't think the game was still that great up until about the last 15, 20 minutes. And at which point it actually started to turn into a bit of a ding-dong cup tie. Lewis Malk scored an absolute breaker to draw United level, but just when it looked like the game was heading for extra time, a wild tackle from Luca Stevenson taking out Moses Abiy, and that allowed Lennon Miller to score from the penalty spot. Not the best of games, good finish, but not the best of games, but cracking atmosphere at Falkirk Park as Motherwell won through to the semi-final where they're going to take on Rangers. Euan, I believe you also watched this game. Anything from it that stands out to you that you want to chat about?
I mean, apart from 2 very aesthetically pleasing goals again. Zach Robinson's finish was into the roof of the net. Very, very, very nice. Having actually with Lennon Miller, who had come on to a minute, almost got a very good goal just before that on the turn, which sort of led to Robinson scored the rebound. Lee Malk's goal, also lovely. I suppose on the Motherwell side, I mean, I think they should really cherish every moment they have with Lennon Miller, because I don't think that's going to be the case for very much longer.
It's actually quite possible that they're playing him as a number 10, so he's not as good, and then they can keep him around for longer. I will say that, and this has been a real kind of bee in my bonnet so far this season. I thought that was the best that's worked so far this campaign.
Yeah,
and I have watched a reasonable amount of Motherwell. That was the best where I thought, right, okay, this finally actually starts to make a bit more sense to me, because he was continually being a threat in the final third. And I thought, okay, if you're trying to bring that out of his game and make him more of an all-round player, then I can kind of see the method in this madness. I still think there'll be a better team if he's played further back. And I'd still think it's maybe a bit early to start adding strings to his bow when can maybe just kind of encourage him to be more of that threat from his normal position.
Yes. Yeah.
But at least there was something there. He was certainly Motherwell's best player in the day.
Yes. And he's just, he has been playing out of position a bit, and I think it's probably, it might be one of those where he ends up scoring more goals. Obviously, he's on penalties now, so that might help. And I don't know if I want to be as cynical as they want him to score a few goals so that they get more money for him. And because obviously he's not going to be at Motherwell for too much longer, regardless, unless there's an injury, because he's just too good. But that may be part of it, or it's just he is just so technically good, and obviously they're sort of lacking in forward options, midfield options anyway, since the summer that it sort of needs must. But he's just a very, very, very good footballer. I think he should he'll be a deep lying midfielder in due course, but just a lovely player to watch. And one of those, I mean, it does sound a bit hyperbolic to sort of wax lyrical about how someone takes a penalty, but in that pressure situation at that age, and to just the technique on it, I mean, it's a penalty, but the technique on it was lovely. And
a Celtic fan.
I know. I was going to say. There's actually probably some similarities there with how Celtic are like hyping up Engels by getting him to take penalties, and that's probably help. That will probably help keep his value as high as Celtic paid. So I think that's I think that would be it will probably work. I don't know if it's still very early for him to move if he's wants to play every week, which that's all the chat is that all he cares about is playing football. I actually don't think he needs to. I've said this a few times. I don't think he needs to play every week as he is at that age. And I don't know if it's entirely beneficial to be as important to Motherwell as he obviously is at that age, given the injury problems that might sort of result from playing every week at that age. But it's certainly, he really is coming on. I think he's a stick on to be Young Player of the Year if he sees out the season at Motherwell. And I'm interested to see where he goes. I mean, I think Serie A probably at this rate. You would think, given the recent moves from this league. So yeah, no, very good. I think Dundee United sort of show. I think it sort of shows where Dundee United are really. I mean, this wasn't a league fixture, but as just as a team, like they've probably got enough about them to be better than the bunch of dough balls we spoke about previously. But I beyond that, I don't think they've they're as good as maybe their initial couple of results in the league or 2 or 3 results suggested. I think they're okay. I think big Jort van de Sand. He's from a made-up country and he's not that good. But they've got enough about them to I think, score enough goals and not concede that many that they'll be fine. But yeah, they're not a particularly great side, and against a team like Motherwell, I think they were second best.
The problem with Jort is that Jort is good at one thing in particular, and that is he's good at holding the ball up and linking with teammates and playing with his back to goal. Not fast, doesn't look like much of a goal threat, not creative, apart from that passing in the Dundee derby, but he's not really shown anything since then to suggest that's the case. But his link-up play and his hold-up play means that you need to kind of either partner him or have somebody with the skill set to stretch, to go beyond him, to go long, and then that works. It's not working right now for United. Again, at the risk of repeating myself for previous podcast, the system they're playing right now does not suit their attackers. And that is, I said that against Hearts when they won. I said it's going to be a problem soon. I think it's already a problem. Babunski looks wasted on the right midfield. Trapanovsky does not look as good at playing that kind of number 10 position where he's, you've got the license to get a roam in and out, but sometimes wingers just want to be on the wing and then play from there. It certainly looks like that's the case with him. I just don't think the pieces fit at this moment in time. I think what you want to be doing is, if you're sticking with the 3-4-3, Babunski needs to drop into midfield. I think you need another winger playing in that, another winger or another proper attacking midfielder. Probably actually another winger, somebody else with a bit of kind of pace, playing in that area further forward. Having Babunski sitting a bit more maybe alongside Docherty, for instance. And I would also say you should be playing with Louis Moult up front. What they're probably best doing is changing to a 4 at the back and starting with a similar team to the one that started the season against Dundee. I can see why Goodwin is doing it, though. I think if the ambition for this campaign is simply just to stay in the league, then you maybe do just go with what's the best setup for not conceding goals. And I think if you look at the personnel that United have at the back, they've probably overachieved in that regard so far this season, and that is probably down to the system. So Goodwin might just want to stick with it because Van der Sande is also the type of player that if you are playing deep, and I think they have to play a bit deep as well because the centre-halves are not quick at all.
Yeah.
Then you want somebody that you can knock the ball up to and who can at least kind of just keep the ball at the park and take the pressure off and mean you can get out. Whereas you might not get that with any of your other attacking options. But it's not. It does feel a little bit like their success so far in the league is built on a foundation of sand.
Yes, Van der Sande. Hey. Also, Lucas Stevenson's not very good. And they're absolute wild.
Play Miller Thompson. What are you doing? It's the latest example of getting some jobber for down south up to take the place of a young Scottish player who could easily be doing as good a job, if not better.
Yes. I thought he was their worst player against Rangers the week prior, and that's just one of the wildest tackles you ever see in a penalty area, especially at that time of the game. So yeah, not convinced remotely by him.
No, certainly not. Right, let's move on to our second game and let's skip all the way to Sunday, and that is Celtic against Falkirk. Celtic 5, Falkirk 2. But that certainly does not tell the whole story in this one. Falkirk led twice in this game. Ross McKeever opening the scoring, Paulo Bernardo equalising for Celtic, but then Falkirk taking the lead again before half-time through Finn Yates. The game reached the 70th minute where Adam Ida scored. And then immediately after that, Falkirk gave up possession in a poor area and Adam Ida scored again. That was at the point where I was like, okay, I think this is enough for this game. After which, Nicholas Kuhn scored another 2 for Celtic. Kuhn had come off the bench and set up both of Ida's goals. So he was responsible for 4 in total. Certainly a decent Sunday for him. But at the end of the day, Euan, nobody really expected Falkirk to go through. And in the end, they could feel very proud of the performance they put in at Celtic Park, even with Celtic making as many changes as they did to their own starting 11.
Yeah, no, I think Falkirk had, were certainly, were well worthy of the lead up until they just sort of fell to bits, and it was always going to be difficult because they were putting in so much effort. They were really, really trying, and not only were they really trying physically, which obviously you have to do, but they were being, I thought, pretty brave on the ball, which I think has a sort of, that takes a bit of a mental load as well, and carries risks. And ultimately, I suppose the third Celtic goal sort of came from not just lumping up the park and then being caught on the ball. So they every time they were winning the ball back when Celtic were and Celtic looked like a wee bit of running out of ideas at one point. They were trying to actually counter-attack effectively, not just lumping the ball forward. So I thought it was a really good performance, some very good individual performances within that, 2 very, very good goals from a Falkirk perspective, albeit not so much from a Celtic perspective, and maybe come on to the main culprit shortly when we talk about Celtic. But McKeever's goal and then the header, both really nice goals. The McKeever one especially, just a great finish, and that's I suppose that's the kind of goal you can maybe score against Celtic, or a much better team, where it's sort of a bit of a you just hit it and it happens to go flying into the corner. Brilliant. But the second goal was that's actually from that's from really good ambitious play, and you've got a guy in Finn Yates that got into the box, and that's that I thought that actually showed their ambition more so than maybe just the first one, which is a bit of a wonder goal. So no, very good. Ultimately, they just ran out of gas, which you can understand, and Celtic brought in the cavalry with half an hour to go. which made a big difference in the game. But yeah, a lot to like about Falkirk. I don't know what I would say about how they would get on if this team, as it stands, got promoted and they didn't turn over the squad too much. I'm not sure, but I suppose they played with the confidence of a team that basically has hardly lost a game in a year, and they weren't overawed by going to Celtic Park. So obviously the next Hearts manager impressed greatly, and I'm sure the Star Lizard will be picking out John McGlynn as the next Hearts manager, which would I always think rating John McGlynn as a manager is like a sort of I feel that a lot of pundits use it to make it look like they know what's going on in the lower leagues by always just saying, "Oh, John McGlynn's a great manager. It's a disgrace he doesn't get more of a chance in the game." It's like, well, yes, and also no, like his record's actually quite patchy. But yeah, he's certainly he's doing a good job at Falkirk, no question about that. And very very good performance from him.
I think with McGlynn, it's due to the fact. I think it's partly due to the fact that he's had a job in the top flight of Scottish football before at Hearts, and it's hard to say he didn't do a good job because that Hearts team was that was the beginning of the team being left to rot. Like anybody that left the previous summer after the Scottish Cup win was not replaced. It was like, okay, we're not spending any more money on players because we're financially insolvent. So we're just going to let the contracts run down on the guys who are still here. And then you have to just play young players other than that. And after initially being a bit reticent to use as many of the young players that a lot of fans kind of wanted, because it was a kind of decent core without being like it was a decent core because you had coming through
guys that have come into a decent career, quite a few of them, haven't they? Yeah.
Jason Hall, Jamie Walker, Callum Patterson. I think Nicholson would have been a bit too young. McGee would have been a bit too young. But there was some like that. Billy King, I think, emerged that season, and he's not gone under a good career, but he looked good when he was a young player. But back then, McGlynn was a different type of manager. He was a manager that I think some people still kind of associate McGlynn with being, but after he took a break from management and he was working as a scout, I think it was for Celtic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then he's completely transformed the way his teams play football since then, and he's kind of what a lot of teams in the Scottish top flight, a lot of fan bases would want in terms of that style of play. I think he just can't shake that earlier stigma, and I think he can't shake that earlier stigma that he has changed because of what he looks like.
Yeah.
And I know that, and that's unfair, and I'm not saying it's not unfair, but that's unfair to John McGlynn because he looks like an old Scottish manager.
He does.
And you think that we all think that old Scottish managers just want to play 4-4-2, 2 backs of 4, knock it long, eye bleeding football. Like he just doesn't look like somebody that reinvents himself mid-career to play sexy football. He just don't, and it's unfair, but that will count against him. But yes. Falkirk fans are obviously reaping the benefits. And I was a Falkirk fan. I think the most what's the word I'm looking for? Encouraging thing for this game is because they made a great start to the championship season. Obviously, they won all 5 of their games, and I think they're second in the table now. But I've got 2 games in hand over Ayr, and they've got 2 games in hand over Ayr, and I think they're only second on maybe goal difference. But I think going forward, the fact that Alfredo Anguian, who has been playing quite well recently, and Finn Yates in the centre of the park, both of those, certainly Aguiman, because when Callum Morrison is fit, he would be expected to start on the right of that midfield. And I can't profess to know a whole lot about Falkirk this season, but I don't think Finn Yates has been starting in the centre of the park. He was a right back last season, having I think originally been a centre midfielder, then was moved to right back, and either centre midfielder or centre half. He was moved to right back last season and done a very good job of it. Like, very impressively so. Like, his performances, at first it just kind of looked like a bit of a stopgap, but he just kind of got better and better in the position. But he's been usurped by Keelan Adams this campaign, a guy who's come from absolutely nowhere to be one of the most important players in Falkirk's team. But if Yates can add a bit more depth to the middle of the park, or even actually I saw Falkirk fans saying they haven't quite figured out the best midfield trio, and maybe that includes Finn Yates in it now in that central position. Then it shows that they've got a bit more depth about them than maybe we've thought about Falkirk in terms of them sustaining this excellent start to the second tier season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, let's go to a game which took place on Saturday evening. In fact, one of two games that took place on Saturday evening, and that was a return to Ibrox for Rangers, with Rangers running out 3-0 winners against Dundee. Euan, before I had too much to drink on Friday and planned on having a day of football throughout Saturday, I was going to watch this. Thinking I had a wee bit of a sense that maybe this could have been the time that Dundee actually do something away in Glasgow in one of the cups. But I'm actually glad that I didn't end up watching this, because it looked very routine, and it means that I didn't really have to do much research on this game, and I'm just going to sit back now for the next 5-10 minutes of the podcast and let you talk.
Yes. No, I mean, Rangers are shite, but they're not losing to Dundee in a quarter-final shite.
I should probably run through the scorers. Sorry, just one final input. Dessers opened the scoring. Tavernier doubled it for the penalty spot in the second half. Desser scored the third. Continue.
You did. Dundee continued their pretty ropey looking form in the absence of McCowan. So I thought Lyle Cameron played well. I really like Lyle Cameron as a player, and he had some lovely touches in this game. But Dundee didn't really threaten a great deal. Rangers, I mean, it's perfunctory enough performance, really. Still had a wee spell of maybe sort of 15-20 minutes-ish first half where they sort of lost a grip of the game a wee bit, which this Rangers team is prone to doing. But I think Rangers are probably worse in every area of the park than they were last season, apart from probably in the forward areas, at least when playing weaker opposition, such as Dundee. So I think now that Bayrami's there, Journey's there, I think you've probably got, I think we know what Dessers is now, and you're probably going to get the Dessers of the second half of last season for all of this season. And Igaman looks an interesting striker as well. That I think that's better than what Rangers had last season. I think everywhere else in the park, Rangers don't look very good, which is why they lose. Look to me pretty ropey at the back. Could concede a goal out of nothing at times, and the midfield doesn't really control games very well. That all those are still issues, but in games like this, I can't see Rangers dropping too many points in the league or going out of cups. In the home games, I think every away game could be a bit of an adventure for Rangers at the moment, because I'm not convinced that as I say, that the rest of the team is sort of solid enough, or the chemistry's sort of right, and I think that's on Clement at this stage. He's been almost a year in the job and should really have a better idea of what his midfield should look like, what his the build-up should look like. But as it stands, Rangers probably have enough firepower, I think, ultimately to win most games, which I think will be borne out. So Bayrami, that was his first start, obviously playing on sort of left wing. I don't think he's a left winger. I think he'd be better as a number 10, but he did put in two really good crosses, one of which led to the first goal. He created a good chance for Dessers, which got saved, but then came back to Tavernier, who sort of fired a cross goal, and then Dessers just diverted it in. And then the third goal, which was a really good sort of first time cross across to Dessers, who had a really good first time finish. So he looks like he'll give you enough in terms of creativity, as will Cherney on the other side. I'd have doubts about both of them playing together against good opposition, because I don't think either of them are very quick. So that's a bit of a problem. But the problem is the quick winger that you have is very injury prone and prone to being absolutely hopeless in Ravi Matondo. So yeah, it's not quite, definitely hasn't worked out the best way for this Rangers team to be set up. I mean, Dijon Sterling, I believe, he got hold of at half time, I believe, having completed 2 passes in 45 minutes playing centre mid, which is not good. It's 2 more passes than Kai Havertz completed, apparently, in however many minutes for Arsenal against Man City yesterday. Apparently completed 0. But yeah, Sterling completed 2 passes playing centre mid for 45 minutes against Dundee, which I think I probably could do that. I think I could beat that if I was playing centre mid for Rangers against Dundee. I'd like to think. I mean, I wouldn't be trying to pick any holes in the defence, but I think I could rack up. Especially I took kick off. Maybe I think I could get another one. But yeah, so that's not good. And Sterling has a bit of an odd season so far. He's not really played that well, but it looks like Rangers sometimes are worse when he's not playing because they don't really have anyone else that wins a tackle. But yeah, so the midfield hasn't found its the formula in there, but I wouldn't say it's usually encouraging for Rangers going forward. But I think it probably shows that where Rangers' floor is, in that they'll have enough to beat most teams. They won't have enough to actually be a success.
Fair enough. Shall we just move on?
Yes,
let's move on. Let's get to our final game, which is Aberdeen 4, Spartans 0. This also took place on Saturday evening. Papagay continued his incredible start to the new campaign by getting Aberdeen off to an early 40-minute lead. Kevin Nisbet scored not long before half-time. Leighton Clarkson scored soon into the second period, making his return from injury. And Esther Sockler was very, very fortunate not to have one of the worst misses Pittodrie's ever seen, but did manage to somehow squeeze the ball into the back of the net with, I think, a little help off the goalkeeper.
Yes. I thought you kicked it backwards, but I managed to score. So I'm not sure.
I think he's maybe a bit lucky that it's not been given as an OG. Yes. Spartans only had one shot on target the entire game, 30% possession. This game is exactly played how you thought it would. Aberdeen's dominated from start to finish. That's not any slight on the Spartans. They're obviously playing a team away from home that are 3 levels above them. So, 3 levels above them. And Aberdeen are just kind of cooking right now as well. So this was always the way it was going to be. And I think the only thing really to talk about for this is that all of a sudden, Aberdeen having had such a kind of really piss poor midfield last season. Like if you include midfield and including like the attacking midfielders and the wingers, like there really wasn't a whole lot going for that unit last season with Clarkson in poor form, Shinnie looking a shadow of his former self at times, not really getting a whole lot from the wings at all. McGrath being good, but not much more than that. All of a sudden now, you're looking at the Aberdeen team, and for this one, Clarkson coming back in meant that there was no place in the starting 11 for Shinnie was out.
I think Shinnie's got an injury.
Shinnie's out anyway, but Keskinen had to drop out because he couldn't drop Gay. So he went out right, and when Shinnie's back, came on in this game, Shinnie. And so he'll now be back in contention, but there's a lot of talk as to whether he'll get back in the team for Palaversa, who seemed to be the general consensus, it was either between him or Clarkson for their best player. And so if you look at the bench in this one, like Shinnie's coming on, Keskinen's coming on, Bazayan and Shaden Morris are not 2 players that before the season you thought were any good, but they've proven themselves this campaign to do still have their uses. And I mean, if you apply this Aberdeen team to like any other team in the league, barring maybe like Hearts or Hibs, like you give them those sorts of players and you think, well, he will be able to do a job for this other team. So when you look around the league at most of the competition that Aberdeen are going to be facing, they've now got real lot of depth in those kind of midfield areas from back to front. The only place where they're maybe lacking is up front, just because there's still question marks around Sockler as Nisbet's back up. And I think Nisbet scored twice as well since he's come in. But performance-wise, hasn't quite looked like the Nisbet at Hibs. Sockler's obviously not really doing it. Ambrose as well hasn't really shown anything to start the season. And I think they're also a wee bit light in defence, because it seems to me that they've only got 3 players covering for 4 positions. And that's Angus MacDonald, Jack Milne, who can play on the right or in the centre, and James McGarry can play at left back, and then that means that if they're missing another player for centre back, then Jack McKenzie can go into there. So that's maybe not ideal, but in that midfield area where obviously it's the bulk of their players are, they always play with a 4-5-1 formation, some variation of that. Then there's a lot of talent in there now.
Yes. I would say I don't know what is going on with the fixture computer, but Aberdeen have had the easiest start to a season that I can ever remember. This might be me being a bitter Rangers fan, but I'm quite happy to be that. Like every week, Aberdeen are playing an absolute idiots, and the Spartans are included in that. I mean, you expected like the next fixture to be like 2007 Gretna and then 2017 Brecon after that. It's ridiculous. Like they've had such an easier, like, I mean, perfect for Thielen to come in and have that. I mean, obviously, the League Cup group stage to begin with, which is always going to be like that because Aberdeen just shouldn't be in that. But where, and the league season has been a very, very soft start, I would suggest. Even the better teams have been playing them in very good circumstances, like when they played Kelly, for example. So. I think
maybe St Mirren as well. Was that a Sunday?
St Mirren was after a European game, also, was it not? So I think I wouldn't. That's all I would do. I mean, I would say Aberdeen have been very good. I would just temper it by who have they played, and I don't think.
I think the response to that though is who have they got to play though?
Yeah, well, there is that. Yeah, and now they're up. I mean, that's the thing. They're now full of confidence, so it's different.
Because when people say this, I'm like, what? So you meaning like, oh, we can't judge them until they play like what this Hearts or this Hibs team?
I suppose it would be your cat. How do they do against Old Firm, and if they take a hiding in a game or two?
Even if they get pumped both games, I mean, I don't think anybody's. Well, I know that people sometimes do, but I don't think that anybody's seriously suggesting that they are going to finish in the top two this season. Anybody that knows what they're talking about surely shouldn't be suggesting that anyway.
Well, I think if you took a poll of Aberdeen fans right now, I think the vast majority would think they'll finish top two. I
don't think that's true. I'd like to think that's not true.
No. Well, certainly the ones I speak to, we can see Tom Watt might deny it, but I think they're very confident of finishing above Rangers.
Yeah, that's not.
And I wouldn't rule out either. I have to say, but that says
come
more.
On, that's definitely not happening.
That says more about Rangers, but it's been such a good start for them. I mean, next week the Dundee away. That's a bit of a harder fixture, but it will be. I mean, losing against Old Firm, you think that's you sort of get a free hit. I don't think it doesn't really get treated like that, and it has actually. I mean, Jim Goodwin's reign, not that it was going great guns, but it was doing okay, and then it completely unravelled because of 2 games against Old Firm, if you recall, when they didn't really try to score a goal against Celtic and had like one shot from about 40 yards out, I think, and got beat. And then they had the Rangers game, which they managed to lose despite being 2-1 up in like the 95th minute or whatever it was. So, and then it started to unravel. So it can even results in games or performances in games which you think you don't expect anything from that anyway could still can still cause issues. So we'll see how they get on. And the Hearts game is obviously a big one the following week. Well, you think so.
We're playing we're playing them after travelling back from where is it we're playing again?
Azerbaijan, isn't it?
Yes,
because it's the Belarusian team, but you're playing them in Azerbaijan.
Yes, so we're travelling back for Azerbaijan, and regardless, we always lose at Pittodrie. So that's going to be 3 points to Aberdeen. So I'm intrigued to see how they get on against Dundee this weekend, because that is probably their toughest. Fair to say their toughest league fixture so far. Yeah, I would say so. So I'll be interested to see how they get on in that one, but I would still fancy them for that. The way they've been playing so far this season.
Yeah, I would, and the way Dundee are playing right now, I would as well. So yes, I mean, it could be that I think they have had a very, very soft start, but that might actually, I think it probably will stand them in good stead when they start playing the weaker or the better teams rather, because now everyone's confidence is up. So yeah, and we'll see See how they go on. But I and there's a lot to like, and it's the fact that a load of players that you'd have basically written off before the season started have been so good. Gay being the main one. That says a lot, I think, for what Thieling's done. But again, he's had the space to do it in, which has been great. And I think actually shows the benefit to appointing a manager in the summer rather than trying to do it mid-season, which obviously 2 clubs already are in the process of trying to do. And while I mean, you wouldn't say that Aberdeen's model of managerial recruitment last season was a great one to follow. With the Warwick thing, almost maybe could have got them relegated if they let it run. But I think not jumping the gun and appointing a permanent manager during the season when they sacked Barry Robson has actually been a good decision in the long term. And it's the problem is when you sack a manager in September or October, as Rangers probably will and have done the last 2 seasons, it's too early to write a whole season off, so you don't really have that option. But there is something to be said for. I mean, Hearts. I think arguably Hearts would be better, sort of. But I would say give it to the caretaker manager at the end of the season, but not if it's Liam Fox.
No,
then you will be playing Championship football next season. But I think there's an argument that maybe it's better to make a big change like Aberdeen have with Tillene in the summer rather than trying to do it mid-season.
Right, Euan, I think that'll do us. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks, Craig.
And thank you to everybody for listening. I was going to plug some stuff, but it's quite late on a Monday night, so let's just wrap it up there. Thank you very much once more, and we will talk to you again soon. Goodbye.